All right, ladies, good morning. Come on in and have a seat. Welcome to Elmore Church of Christ. This is our Sunday morning Bible study. This is not the formal introduction. I just want to start off. Don Williams is from the North Alabama Children's Home that we support every month, and he'll be doing the Bible class this morning and doing worship. And Marshall will do a more formal introduction prior to the worship. Go ahead, Don.
Thank you. It is always an honor to be here, and it's always wonderful to see people that I've known and loved for a long, long time. Marshall and I have decided that we know too many stories about each other, so there's some things you just can't talk about. But anyway, it is a joy to be here, and I want to thank that good fella. I told him, I said, many places where I've gone to speak, I think it's up to about 375 times, different places. People say, oh, we'll have a table, we'll have everything set out. Well, only about 25% of the time is it all set. Well, it was set. I mean, he was here. He helped me get everything set up. And so you just can't say enough about him. And I really appreciate him. Turn in your Bibles to Luke chapter 10. We want to look at a very familiar story, but perhaps in a different way. And so I'm just going to start reading in Luke chapter 10, verse 25. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, What's written in the law? What's your reading of it? So he answered and said, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You've answered rightly. Do this, and you will live. But he, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor? Then Jesus answered and said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, fell among thieves, who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise a Levite, when he arrived at the place, came and looked and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was. And when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. On the next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, Take care of him. And whatever more you spend, when I come again, I will repay you. So which of these 3 do you think was neighbor to him who fell among the thieves? And he said, He who showed mercy on him. Then Jesus said to him, Go and do likewise. This story begins with a fella asking a great question. Wouldn't it be wonderful if today, wherever we're eating or wherever we happen to be, in Walmart or whatever, somebody says, Hey, I understand you're a Christian. What do I need to do to get my life right with God and His Word? How wonderful that would be. Of course, sadly, we know that he only asked it for the purpose of trying to back Jesus into a corner, to try to get him to say something that he could use against him. This isn't Alexander Shannara. Back in those days, lawyers were like scribes. They were the ones that knew and wrote the scriptures. And often people thought because of that, they would be those that could get interpretation. And so Jesus answered him with a question. He often does that. And so he asked a question. So he turns around and he says, What's written in the law? You're the one that writes it down. What's your reading or understanding of it? He quoted from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 and 5. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind. On those worship services on Saturdays, these words, the Shema, would be used at the beginning of services and at the end of services. Then he quoted from Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And so Jesus complimented him. You've answered rightly. Do what you've just said and you will live. And so now he has to save face because Jesus knew that he had not asked for his own sake, but to try to test him And so he says, and who is my neighbor? And then he talks about that journey that some had taken. That road from Jerusalem to Jericho, 18 miles in length, the mountainous stretch. The old Western movies where, the stagecoaches are going up and down the hills and whatever, and all of a sudden somebody comes out from behind the rocks. That's my thought on this. I'm not sure if that's the case actually, but that's sort of the idea that I get, that they sort of jumped this fella. And there's more than one, thieves. And they take him of any garments that would be of value, wound him. And then Dr. Luke, through the mind of God only, tells us that he's mortally wounded. He's not just beaten up. He's half dead. He's going to die in the situation that he's in unless somebody comes to help him. A priest, it's interesting, the word suggests by chance, comes along this road. And he sees him, but if he's headed to Jerusalem, to the temple, he realizes that to touch somebody beaten up like this means that he'll be unclean. He can't go into the temple. And so he just passes by. And then the Levite that worked there in the temple, sometimes perhaps doing the grunt work. They may be the ones that on occasion would clear the altar once the animal sacrifice has been there. They were used to helping out in various ways. He comes over and looks at him. David, I thought to myself, which is worse? The one that just passed by or the one that's standing over him, seeing his situation, him seeing him, and then having him to walk away. And then the Bible tells us about the Samaritan. Notice what it says about him as he journeyed. He had places to go. He had commitments to keep. He had people to see. But unlike the others, he had compassion. And that moved him to take care of his needs. That moved him to help him and take him to that end of their day, to see after his needs, and then to leave money behind. And then Jesus asked the question, so of the three, he's again asking a question, of the three, which one really showed mercy? That's what you're asking about. Who is your neighbor? And he said, he that showed mercy. And then he says, you go and you do likewise. Well, that's the story, but now I want us to think about it in a different way. Which one am I in this story? Have you ever stopped to think about bringing this home to your own life and thinking about which role would I play if I were a part of this story? What about the Samaritan? We know that when the 12 tribes of Israel were divided, Israel is called Samaria and also Ephraim. When they were taken in Assyrian captivity in 722 BC, they allowed foreign nations to move into Israel, and some intermarried with them. They were called Samaritan. It was a term of contempt. They were looked down upon. In fact, the lawyer can't even bring himself to say the Samaritan was the one that showed mercy. But unlike the others, he had compassion. When we see the ills of others, the hurts of those around us, do we say, well, everybody's got problems, or do we think about having compassion? Compassion has been described as your pain in my heart. It's feeling, trying to feel what others are feeling, how people are dealing with the things that they have. And this man, perhaps on a business trip, did the things that were needful to do to take care of him. He ascertains the situation. He goes back to his beast of burden. He brings in oil and wine. Wine as an antiseptic, oil to seal and dull the pain. He sets him on his own animal. Now, that's just one little phrase, but have you ever picked up somebody on the ground that can't help themselves? Many of you have. We call that dead weight. Imagine how hard it would be. These knees don't get down as low as they used to. But imagine trying to literally pick somebody up, hoist him up to put him on the donkey or wherever it was. and then he walks while the others ride. He's the one that took care of him to see after his needs. Are we that kind of person? When we see the hurts of others, do we try to do something about that, especially in the lives of children? We've had some 600 to 700 children come to North Alabama Christian Children's Home in the last 51 plus years. And some stay for a matter of days. Some stay as long as 10 years. We have one that's been there now going on 6 years. She'll be graduating in May. And the first days are often the toughest, especially the first day when they come from a world of chaos, which they call their home, to a place of structure, a place of order, a place hopefully of love. And yet they don't know that. And so I remember on one occasion we had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy that was coming to the home. And you can just sort of see the concern that they had on their faces. Even Scout, the dog's going to lick you to death on campus, the campus dog, they were a little scared of. But after a while, they got settled in, and we showed them the bicycles right in the middle of the campus, and they could just ride the loop. And one of our girls that had been there for a year or so, Amelia, walked over and got on a bicycle and began to talk to them, began to ride with them, began to make them feel a little bit more comfortable. And you could even see it. In fact, after a while, the boy said, that dog's going to be my favorite kind of dog. And so already he was changing his mind. And so as they were riding and they were just easing up and getting better because of compassion that she had for them, I called her over and I said, Amelia, thank you so much for being so kind to them and helping them feel better today. And she looked at me and she said, Mr. Don, that's what I'm here for. Are we that kind of person in regards to helping in the lives of others? What about the bandages? I'm sure there's some medical people here. He didn't put those bandages on for one time. You have to change fresh wounds regularly in those first 24 hours. And so you can imagine when they get back to the end of that day, he's staying up at night taking care of him, rechanging, cleansing those wounds, taking care of them, being hands-on, if you will. Are we that way to be able to help in the lives of others? Maybe whether the wounds are literal or whether they are mental or emotional or even spiritual. With children, a lot of times the wounds are inward, not outward. I've seen situations where you can see a bruise where somebody literally hit a child before they got there. But a lot of times they were inward. We had 3 boys from one home that came and stayed about 2 years. And the separation had not been a good one. It was forced because of what the parents had done. And so when the mother came to visit, which I didn't know was for the first time, the visit had to be supervised by DHR, which meant that one of us, or else DHR, had to literally be there and making sure that the visit went like it needed to. They didn't give them something or talk down about the home or whatever the case may be. Well, they asked me to do so, and my office was about 20 feet away from where they were meeting there in the conference room. And so I'd walk back and forth just to make sure that everything was good and whatever. And this was around Christmas time, or right after Christmas, actually. And so talking to the mother, not knowing the situation, everything, I said, how long has it been since you've seen your boys? And before she could answer, the oldest one said, 7 weeks and 2 days. He'd been counting. And he knew just how hard it had been because of the mom and what had happened. The youngest one later on said to the mom, Mom, you weren't here when we had our big Thanksgiving feast. Mama, you weren't here when we got to have the Christmas Eve party and open up a lot of our gifts. You weren't here when I got to wear my new clothes to church on Sunday. You weren't here, Mama, when we had our big New Year's Eve party. Mama, you missed it all. And she cried like a baby. Are we the bandages in trying to help people? You know, the Bible says, Romans 12:15, rejoice with those that do rejoice and weep. He didn't say or, and weep with them that weep. What about the oil and the wine? The Bible talks about how that a merry heart does good like a medicine, Proverbs 17, verse 22. And how that, in Hebrews chapter 1, verse 9, God anointed Jesus with the oil of gladness. They were used for medicinal purposes, but the whole idea is that we need to immerse ourselves in people. Just as we're pouring on something for a thing that needs a bandage or whatever the case may be, or taking care of a wound, we need to be in the lives of people and be ready to help them. Over in Psalm 142, verse 4, I believe there's one of the saddest verses in all the Bible, when the writer says, I looked on my right hand and beheld, but there was no man that would know me. Refuge failed me. No man cared for my soul. Isn't that sad? Wouldn't that be terrible if there was somebody right here in this congregation or right here in this neighborhood that needed help, and yet we weren't there to help them? Are we the oil and the wine? You ever thought about the donkey in this story? The man's beaten up and half dead. He's dying. As good as it was, the Samaritan was helping him. The donkey did what no one else could do, take him from point A to point B, to a place of help, to a place of convalescence. How important it is when we're willing to help in the lives of others. My granddaddy had a book of poems entitled Meditation Meadows, J.E. Williams. And in it, he talks about a consecrated car. In other words, a car that was used to take people in need, maybe to the doctor or to buy groceries for them or whatever the case may be. It's a little far for you, but we always need people to give transport for our children. We let them use our vehicles. One time we had 22 children. We're down a lot right now, but we had 22 children. Imagine all the appointments, all the different things that they have to go through, especially if it was in the same week. We had an older couple on campus, Harold and Beverly Buchanan. They came from Michigan, but they lived there in the Florence area, and they came to help us. And they would do the yard work. They would also do the maintenance. I remember seeing her in her late 70s running a weed eater for an hour or 2 hours at a time. Boy, she was good. He'd be riding the mower. I won't say any more. But anyway, maybe he didn't want her to ride the mower. Maybe that was it. I don't know. But on occasion, they do transport for us. There was a young man named Justin. Justin had come to us 3 different times. Sadly, he had gone home to people to be adopted, only for them to turn him back in twice. Very sad situation. And so he asked if the Buchanans could take him to his doctor's appointment. Well, we said yes, because we probably needed the help. And so the doctor's appointment was about 10:30 or 11, and they come back about 1:30 or 2. And so I asked them, I said, is everything all right? Did you have to wait a long time? Was there something going on there at the doctor's appointment? He said, no. He said afterwards, Justin said, there's a McDonald's around the corner. And so they went to McDonald's. And every time Justin would ask them to be the ones to take him, and they'd often go to McDonald's, and they would never turn in a receipt. And then we got to thinking, his parents weren't in his life. He came to us because his grandmother died. Here were the grandparents that he didn't have. And they were often seen as grandma and grandpa there on campus, and they were the donkey in terms of helping out. What about the denarii? Maybe health doesn't allow you to do the things hands-on that you once did. Maybe other situations enter into it where you cannot be a part of things physically, but God's blessed you materially, and how important it is when people use what they have. Somebody brought in some full coin cans, and we have some more back there, and we're so grateful that you were willing to help us. And that monthly support means a great, great deal. It's wonderful when folks use what they have. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17, talking about how that God blesses you so that you can give liberally and receive blessings from him is important as well. Took in friends to her own home, providing an end, if you will, to see after the needs of those who could not do so. How wonderful when people are that giving and that loving and willing to help out in that manner. We certainly don't want to be the lawyer. How sad it would be for people to concede the goodness of this stranger and not even calling him by name. How sad that he was concerned only in trying to trap Jesus rather than listening to a lesson. I mean, he asked a great question, eternal life. He was in the presence of Jesus, and yet it was for the wrong reason. How sad that he would waste his time in that way. How sad that he wasn't willing to extend mercy to someone in need, or willing to even show kindness to the person who did extend mercy. You know, over in James chapter 2, verse 13, he talks about having judgment without mercy, and how important it is for us to be right, but for us also to be kind and considerate and helpful to others. We don't want to be the priest or the Levite. unwilling to get their hands dirty, seeing the situation right there in front of them, one of them even walking over and looking at them, but not taking care of them. 1 John chapter 3, verses 17 and 18 says, "But whoso has this world's goods and sees that his brother has need, yet shuts up his bowels of compassion from him," God says, how does the love of God dwell in him? It does. And then he says, "My little children, let us not love in word and tongue, but in deed," that is action, "and in truth." And in this story, we need to think about the one beaten up. Because you can see the news today, just like any other day, somewhere, someone has been hurt in some manner. Someone has been hurt, whether physically or mentally or sexually or spiritually. And a lot of times they're children that aren't big enough, strong enough to prevent people from doing bad things to them. You see the facts, 72% of children in foster care have been abused in some way or another. 90% of children in foster care have seen a father hit their mother. We had 2 boys that were with us, and I met one of them about 2 weeks ago, and he's doing well. He works at 55 Diner there in the Florence area, and he came up and introduced himself to me. His brother ended up with us because his daddy was beating this little brother, and the older brother took a baseball bat and held the father down and said, "You're not going to hit him anymore." And because of the lies the daddy told, they ended up with us, which may have been a good thing, if you know what I mean. A child in a single-parent home is 33 times more likely to be abused, 73 times more likely to be killed than a child living with a dad and a mom in the same home. And every 2 minutes in America, a child enters the foster care children system. We need to be thoughtful, and I'm sure with DHR there in Montgomery, you're mindful of a lot of that. But in the end, our Lord at this story says, who was the one that showed mercy? And then he points the finger at us and he says, you go and you do likewise. And so whether it's helping us or helping a neighbor down the street or helping a family member or a complete stranger, God says there's blessings in doing the right things. I want to show some pictures about the home itself. Out of COVID, sadly, some good things took place. Tyson Foods began to donate a lot of food to us. And eventually, after about 2.5 years, it was 275,000 pounds of chicken and pork. I believe I talked to Marshall to see if one time they wanted to come and get some. But we did extend it to a great deal of people. The Hesters there on the right were the ones that did so. This good man, Mr. Walker, said, when you need to go get it picked up, you call us and we will go in our big trucks and pick it up completely free. They did that 5 different times. Somebody told me that, a minimum $5,000 to $10,000 a trip, and yet they would do that, and were so, so kind. And thankfully, 3 people obeyed the Lord and became Christians out of just folks, completely strangers, giving folks to people in need that came to get it whenever it was offered. It would come in big trucks like this. There on the right, you see Chris Moran with the gloves on, our new director. But we would eventually give it away to the Florence Coliseum. And so people would come in all one day, and we'd have certain times for people to come. I believe we helped about 15 to 20 children's homes, about 50 different churches from 4 states. And then I believe it was about 50 or 60 nonprofit agencies that also came and got all that. We're still looking for some more. There on the right, you see a log chain. You can do a whole lot with a log chain and a pallet. And so there they are using that tractor or whatever to pull that out. And we have our drive-through takeout dinner. which I'll talk about here in just a moment. But I use that picture because the fellow there in the blue overalls is Brother Columbus Coker, who has now died and gone on to his reward at the age of 96. But he helped start the home, and he was the one that did a great deal. This is our biggest fundraiser. It's the most fun that we have. It's the hardest thing that we do. Marshall and some of his family has come. I don't know if anybody else has ever been there, but there are the dates. We'd love for you to come up and be a part of it. It's a 2-day or 3-day event. The yard sale is there in the barn on the left, and that starts on Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday. But then Friday and Saturday, we have all kinds of people come and help us make all kinds of great food. And we put all the big things that we're going to sell under the tent outside. There you have people cutting up the chicken, cutting up the potatoes for a lot of barbecue and a lot of chicken stew and goat stew. Anybody ever tried goat stew? Thank you. There you go. There I see some. There's some good folks. Keep your hands up, raising the good thing. It's really lean. It's really good. You just got to get past the idea of it being goat, but it really is. And our board chairman makes it, and about 30 gallons of that. And one fella called up a couple of years ago. He called me up and he said, "Are y'all going to have goat stew again?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, can I order some ahead of time?" I said, "Well," I said, "I guess." I said, "We're not going to have as much as we normally do." It was a little goat, as the story goes. Goats, I should say. And he said, "I'll give you $50 a gallon." I said, I think we can make the work. $50 a gallon? He said, "You can't find it." And so sure enough, he took home 3 gallons. And but that was a really neat thing. There's just a lot of good folks. We have about 10 different congregations that jump in on this event and have a lot of fun. In that picture there to the left is Robert Coates, and he and his good wife started this, and his family just continues. Mike Davidson, some of you may know his parents from Eastern Meadows, but that's Mike with the cap on, and he does our barbecue, 200 pounds of barbecue, and we have a lot of fun. 150 gallons of chicken stew. They stay up all night long. Some folks on Fridays cut up the chicken and the potatoes that go along with it, the onions, and all the goat stew comes in that big witch's pot, I guess you call it there, that you see there on the right. And it's a lot of fun. All this is free. We ask people if they want to make a donation, but it's a lot of fun, and this has been a great event. We've had as many as 800 people be a part of it, and we would love for you to come March 7th and 8th, and it's a great deal. Altogether, that event, this will be our 16th year. Altogether, that event's raised over $610,000. People know what the money's going for. And so, they'll go to the yard sale, buy just a few items, and leave $25 or more. And Ride in the Home is involved often a lot of motorcycle people, but anybody and everybody can come. Life Flight flies in right there to the children's home, and that's really a neat thing. And so this past year we had about 200 people there, and it's always a lot of fun. It's right there at the children's home. That's Brother Coker and the Benny sidecar, I call it, or Rayberry sidecar. But he would come in with his nephew there. This is the beginning building that we had on campus. It's still there, but May 6th of 2023, we celebrated 50 years, which is really a big deal in children's homes. There are a lot of children's homes that are closing because of lack of funding, lack of help. Right now, we're looking for additional house parents, if you know of anyone. But anyway, that's a big issue, and we're grateful that we have, with the help of so many, been able to continue to keep our doors open. Brother Coker at this time was very sick in the nursing home. He couldn't come, so his 2 children came. We presented them a plaque, and then he died about maybe a month or so after this. There's Brother Coker and his family, and that's where we've had that trail ride and auction. Folks who have horses, that's what Marshall did. He brought some of his horses, and he rode his trails that Saturday morning. And then about 12:15, the big auction took place. But people can do that. There's no cost at all to do that. We had one time, one of the first years we did it, we had 165 horses and riders. And it took them about maybe 2.5 hours to ride the trails, and then they came back and enjoyed all the good food. That's my family. We're grateful for them. Ben on the left, the deacon at Meridianville, and then Matt on the right and his family. Our son, grandson there, Braden, is at Free Hardeman. So we now have a grandchild there at Free Hardeman, and his sister will be there in a couple of years. There's a picture of Lisa. There's a picture of my wife, and there's a picture of some of the children. Several of those children on those steps have been adopted. We've had, I believe, 22 adopted in the last 16 years. More importantly, we've had 42 become New Testament Christians, and we thank you for allowing us to be able to do that. We are building, and we are always desirous of people being able to help us. It's going to be an all-purpose building. Where you see the school building there, the first building, that tree now is completely gone, and that's where it is going. It's going to be a 60 by 100 square foot building, 6,000 square feet, enough to hold 400 people for an event, but also a basketball goal and in it, as well as other things. You can see there's some of the digging going on, hooking up the septic tanks. The fellow who did that completely free for us, and we were grateful for all that he saved. You can see the lines going in and all the other different things. And now the concrete's completely poured. And a week ago, Friday or Thursday maybe, they brought in the building. So it's now going up. And on my phone, I have a picture of it going up. And so we're grateful for that. And I always appreciate anybody who can help us with that. There's, again, the concrete slab there in front of the old school. And that's the last pictures that were taken. That was the day that they were bringing the big metal building in. And so this fellow was unloading it. There's the aerial shot where you see there in the yellow. That's exactly where it's going. And so that big tree is gone so that we can do that. So far, we've had 10 congregations. Our local legislators gave us $15,000. They told us not to tell that, so I guess it's all right to tell you here, maybe. But they believed in the children's home. They've done that 2 other times. Some of them are members of the church. Tim Meltson, representative. Philip Pettis, members of the church. And so we're grateful that they think enough of us to do that. Of the 350,000 needed, so far 121,000 has been given, and other congregations are going to be involved, as well as a lot of people there in the area. There's a good picture of Chris and his good family. Elizabeth, his oldest daughter there, has had some health issues. Be praying for her, but she is doing better. And that's Liam, and he is all boy, a great fella. Altogether, they've adopted 6 children, and so they're vested in this work, if you know what I mean. When they left us in 2012 as house parents, and I was the director, he said, Don, I got some bad news for you. I said, what's that? He said, well, in about a month or so, we're going to be leaving. I said, well, I really hate to hear that. He said, I'm going to take a job as a minister, so I couldn't feel bad about that. But he said, we're also taking all of our children from our home with us. I thought, what? And so sure enough, they did. And they adopted some of them. And they are like, great parents for the other ones unofficially. They still stay in contact with those girls. And so I couldn't say no. He was practicing what we just talked about, right? Being the Good Samaritan and helping out in the lives of people. And so they practice what they teach, and him and Janice are wonderful folks, and he's doing a great job. Got a few minutes for questions in case you have any, and if not, we'll take a break. Anybody have a question about anything I said or anything else about the children's home? Yes, ma'am.
How many children do you have now that you're taking care of?
Because we have 2 homes that we don't have house parents for, We have just 6 right now. We're hopefully going to be getting a situation fixed real soon so that we'll have another girls' home opening up with boys' home and girls' home that we need house parents for. So it's just really hard to use people, in and out for a couple of days. I actually did some of that myself and provide the stability that they need. So that's why we were down that way. But we've had as many, typically 10 to 12, and sometimes more than that, as many as 22. Appreciate the question. Anything else? Back on the table is a list of their birthdays. Some people send cards to them. That always means a great deal that somebody thinks about them. I talked to one of our boys this weekend, Nemo. I'm speaking at Mercedes Drive tonight, and he was living in Tuscaloosa, so I called him because I thought, well, maybe he can come over and we can go out to eat and he can hear us speak and everything. And he said, Brother Don, he said, I'm in Nebraska. I said, well, I guess you can't be there this weekend, then, can you? He said, I'm a traveling welding person. And he said he got his training with us, there locally. And he said, I'd go from place to place. And he's trying to go to church, and he's a Christian. And so pray for Nehemiah. We call him Nemo. That's his nickname. But anyway, we're grateful that he is doing well as others. Thank you again for your kind attention and your continued support.